In my artistic practice, I'm often thinking about repetition, form, structure, layers, and how to make something that's more complex out of simple parts. So for that reason, I love using lines and grids, these simple little elements that come together to kind of build a more complex form. I'm really interested in architecture as well, so I think that kind of connects with that sort of idea. Creating these structures, particularly using lines, and dealing with perspective to help build up an environment. So for this exhibition in particular, I wanted to think about works that deal with transparency and also opacity between lines and layers. So in past works, I've created pieces that mostly dealt with opaque layers. So if part of the painting or piece was folded back onto itself, maybe you couldn't see through it. But then for this one, I wanted to think about, okay, what could those overlaps in lines look like, and how could that help inform my ideas on depth and perspective? So I still use some areas where maybe overlaps didn't allow lines to pass through, but I played with certain sections, particularly the pieces on canvas, where some of the lines can pass through some areas but not through others, and wanted to kind of play with that idea of why could these lines go through here but not through here, what exists behind that. So I'm still dealing with the theme of making something 2D look 3D, which is something that has been an important part of my work for years. And then I started again to carry that into this show. One interesting thing that I really wanted to think about for this show was taking something 2D to 3D, but physically bending it to bring it into 3 dimensions. So the pieces, the wave pieces, that they're similar to ones that I've done in the past, where it's a flat 2D plane. I tried to make it look like part of the corner is folded over, but then I left it flat so it looks like a 3-dimensional sort of object or something that's folded. But I wanted to bend it because the material can actually be bent to see what effect that could have on the straight lines. So that was really interesting. It was a new way of actually physically bringing something from 2D to 3D and kind of using that bending as a method to draw and manipulate the lines. I also was very into drawing a lot for this exhibition. I've done drawings for years, but this is the most that I've done specifically for a particular show. It's really my favorite way to work through ideas. I think the simplicity of pen and paper kind of helps me sort through ideas and concepts. So for this, I think this exhibition is, it's the beginning of, I think, a new path of ideas that's a little bit different than the past 6 years. So I think I spent so much time on drawing because of that. I was working through a lot of ideas. I worked through a sketchbook for this show in particular, and I took it with me on a couple of trips around the U.S. that I took. 2 of them I went to the desert, to Joshua Tree, and then also to Sedona. So they're both desert landscapes. Sedona in particular deals with a lot of red rocks. There's a lot of red rocks everywhere, which is really interesting. And they're these big open spaces with these rocks and these forms kind of jutting out of the landscape. So I think just a very inspiring, calm, peaceful place in general. So I took that sketchbook with me there, was able to work through some ideas there, and then I've kind of been working through it as the whole exhibition. Been working through this one sketchbook. So that's been really fun to see how the ideas had developed and changed. And then I would take those sketches, and some of them became drawings, some of them became the basis for paintings or other pieces in this show. So the creative process for me for this show, it's been with a lot of experimentation, I think, because my ideas and concepts are kind of shifting to a new method that's a little bit different than the past years. But all in all, I've always been very formulaic and scientific in how I approach ideas. Like, I love doing lots of research and tests and exploration, and it's a huge part of my practice is the process itself. I'm very process oriented, and obviously I want to make a really great finished product, but the process is very important to me as well. I feel like I'm continually learning as I'm creating. And that learning process is really, really fun for me. It kind of helps me bring a little bit of unplanned and planned elements to a piece. I tend to be pretty planned when it comes to the pieces that I make, particularly if I'm getting a shape cut out or something. I need to kind of think of what it's going to look like at the end, at the beginning. But I also allow for some unplanned elements. Like if I'm working with straight lines, I'll leave spaces between lines. Those are unplanned, just as I think that they should fit. And often after drawing them, I'll go in and take out some sections or add in more lines. So that part is more responsive to what's happening on the painting in particular. So that's pretty evident in those pieces on canvas, those dashed lines. I didn't say I'm going to do a space here and then here and then here. I just did them as they came up. So I like having that sort of dual approach of planned and unplanned. So the paintings in general, they were pretty planned before I started them. I work a lot on my iPad to kind of work through ideas quickly as well as sketching. But then I allowed a lot of unplanned elements to come in. So it's been a different way of working for this exhibition, which I think is really exciting. As I mentioned, I do feel like it's the beginning of a shift of new types of pieces. I love working with different materials, and I've never just stuck to drawing or painting or anything in particular. I'm more interested in the concept and idea, and then thinking, how can I best represent this, or how can I best try to understand this more? How can I understand depth? How can I understand perspective? How can I understand how we interpret the world around us? That's really my main goal in trying to, just understand a particular idea or concept. And in doing so, I'm like, okay, well, is this material best? Is this material best? Or maybe there's several materials that I can think about to describe this element. So I think that's really fun. It allows me to not be confined to just pen and paper or just painting. I really love just being able to be open to a wide amount of materials or different ways of working through an idea.